Hey there. I recently married my husband after being together for 6 years. We kept it intimate, tying the knot at his aunt's charming farmhouse. I had always dreamed of a beach wedding, something we both cherished, as we often went to the beach to unwind. It held a special place for us, and I even started looking into hotels for guests. Like any bride envisioning a grand celebration, I worked in advertising, saved for years, and was eager to host a luxurious seaside wedding. But things took a drastic turn. A few months prior, my parents borrowed a large sum of money from me. Then, my brother unexpectedly got married. It was a small ceremony, but I was happy for him. Not long after, my mother asked for $115,000 for my father's medical bills, claiming his diabetes had led to serious complications. I didn't hesitate to lend it, concerned about his health. But when I visited, my father didn't seem as sick as my mother had led me to believe, and she deflected when I asked for his medical reports. She insisted on a costly imported drug that wasn't covered by insurance, even though she assured me hospitalization wasn't needed. The more I visited, the more uneasy I became. But I hesitated to confront them. Accusing someone of fabricating a medical emergency could be disastrous if they were truly telling the truth. When I noticed my brother wasn't visiting either, I asked about it. My father told me they didn't want to worry him since he was busy with work. Meanwhile, they seemed perfectly fine with me being stressed out. I eventually spoke to my brother after weeks of him not visiting our father. He casually mentioned he'd come by after his honeymoon. To my surprise, he hadn't told me he'd even left. He explained they'd planned to surprise everyone with stories and photos from their European trip, which had been kept a secret. He hadn't mentioned it earlier because he knew I was worried about Dad's health. Then my brother confirmed that our parents had told him everything was fine and that they might have exaggerated things to me. I wanted to believe they were just protecting him, but what I saw at their house was undeniable. As the conversation unfolded, red flags flew up. My brother revealed that our parents were funding his lavish honeymoon, which had cost over $125,000. Luxury hotels, fine dining, shopping, everything was covered by them as a belated wedding gift. It hit me like a ton of bricks. My money wasn't going toward medical expenses, it was being used to fund his extravagant trip. There were no hospital visits, no medical records, just an elaborate ruse to direct my funds toward his honeymoon. Listening to my brother boast about our parents' generosity made my blood boil. They were using the money I'd saved for my wedding to finance his indulgence. It felt like a slap in the face, knowing they prioritized his honeymoon over my wedding. When I confronted my parents about it, they admitted they had fabricated the medical emergency because they knew I wouldn't willingly fund my brother's honeymoon. They justified it by saying he was struggling at work and needed a morale boost. They couldn't afford it themselves, but they thought I would be more likely to help, assuming I have more earning years ahead to pay them back. They downplayed my anger, dismissing it as just money, and promised to repay me eventually. In their eyes, my brother's happiness and mental well-being were more important than my wedding plans. It was infuriating. My wedding budget had been sacrificed for something I had never agreed to. I demanded repayment before the wedding because I needed those funds for my beach ceremony. Although my husband's family was pitching in to cover some costs, I still had significant financial responsibilities. My parents have always made it clear they couldn't afford both my education and my wedding. I decided to pay for my wedding myself after college, and now their lies threatened to derail my carefully planned day. I brought up my brother's favoritism, which had always been clear. When he went to college, I had asked if they had made him choose between paying for his education or his wedding. He laughed it off, never once acknowledging their bias. I'd been too young to confront them about it back then, still dependent on them and trying to keep the peace. Years later, when I confronted them about the money they borrowed from me, I called them out on their favoritism. They denied it, but it was obvious. I insisted they repay me because I had worked hard and saved for my dream wedding, not for my brother's extravagant trip. They claimed they couldn't pay it all back before the wedding and suggested a repayment plan stretching out over years. They insisted, family comes first, justifying their actions with the idea that I had been willing to support a fabricated medical emergency to help my father. The truth was, my brother's work issues were because of his lack of effort. His sales job was commission-based, and his low performance wasn't due to depression, as they claimed. He was simply lazy and entitled, spoiled by our parents. They exaggerated his struggles to justify funding his lavish trip, making him out to be a victim when he was anything but. I tried explaining how important my wedding was to me. My husband's family had already committed to covering certain expenses, and I needed the borrowed money to fill the gap. But my parents insisted they couldn't pay me back in time and suggested I scale down or ask my husband's family for more help. I pleaded with them to honor their promise, but they refused. I left their house in tears, telling my husband everything. He was furious and wanted to involve a lawyer, but without any written proof, I knew there was little chance of success. Everything had been informal, no contracts or official records to back my claim. Since we lacked evidence, filing a lawsuit against my mother seemed pointless. We didn't want to waste money on legal fees when the odds of winning were slim. Instead, we refocused our energy on adjusting our wedding plans. Thankfully, my husband's family stepped in. His aunt offered her farmhouse venue free of charge. Although I had dreamed of a beach wedding, her suggestion intrigued me, and I decided to visit the venue right away. I walked into the venue and immediately I knew it was the right choice. Though it wasn't the beach wedding I'd envisioned, the farmhouse setting turned out to be perfect for us. And the best part, we had the entire venue free of charge, which was a huge relief given the financial strain we were under. Wedding planning became my escape from the chaos with my parents. I had already made up my mind that they wouldn't be invited, but I was torn about whether to invite my brother, especially since he wasn't aware of their deception. After he returned from his honeymoon, my brother called to scold me for asking our parents to repay the money. To my surprise, he downplayed the situation despite being the one who spent it. He promised to pay me back eventually but insisted that I simply accept it and scale down my wedding plans. His response made everything clear. I stopped talking to both him and our parents. Without my wedding savings, I had no choice but to scale back the wedding. Ironically, that ended up being the best decision. Our wedding was intimate, beautiful, and focused on what truly mattered, us and the people we loved. Instead of splurging, we saved money for something more meaningful after the ceremony. Looking back, I'm grateful for how it turned out. Our day was still magical and filled with love. When I shared photos of the wedding on social media, I made sure that only invited family members were in the loop. I asked them not to inform my parents or brother to avoid unnecessary drama. But somehow, they found out and contacted me the following day, demanding an explanation for not being invited. I couldn't believe they still expected an invitation given the distance between us. The last conversation we had ended in tears, and since then, I'd had no contact with them. Yet they felt entitled to attend and were furious about being excluded. My parents called me, adding my brother to the conversation. They all yelled at me at once, but I stayed calm, recognizing their sense of entitlement. I had already distanced myself from them and didn't want their drama ruining my newly happiness. I calmly explained that after they borrowed money from me, I had to cut down on the guest list to keep things within my budget. Since they weren't close family, they weren't invited. After the call, I blocked them, hoping that would end the conflict. But my husband later told me my brother had reached out to him, claiming my parents were deeply hurt by not being invited. Apparently, my mother had cried so hard that she nearly fainted. I started to feel guilty, even though I knew I had every right to exclude them after they took money that was meant for my wedding. It's been a week since I last spoke to them, and I've decided to cut off all communication for good. My mother's tears don't change the reality. I was the one who cried when I begged them to return the money before my wedding, and they brushed me off. Now, I'm treating their actions with the same indifference. They've made their bed, and now they have to lie in it. I told my brother never to contact me or my husband again, especially not my husband, who had nothing to do with any of this. I blocked him to ensure that they can no longer interfere in my life. They treated me poorly for too long, and I won't tolerate it any longer. If I could, I'd file a lawsuit to recover my money, but without tangible evidence, it's unlikely to succeed. My husband thinks it's worth pursuing, so we're consulting with a reputable lawyer to determine our next steps. In the meantime, I'm figuring out how to get them to admit that they borrowed the money under false pretenses, claiming it was for a medical emergency when it was really to fund my brother's honeymoon. Proving this in court will be difficult, but I'm not letting them off the hook easily. I deserve that money back, and I'm determined to get it. Yesterday, I specifically asked my brother not to involve my husband in our family drama, but he ignored my request. When my husband came home from work, he told me my parents and brother had bombarded him with texts, demanding that he convince me to unblock them. Things escalated further when they showed up at his workplace, following him and honking until he pulled over. My husband recognized my brother's car and knew they'd follow him home, so he decided to stop and confront them. They met at a nearby diner, where my family lectured my husband. My brother couldn't believe I was cutting ties over money and called it an overreaction. They argued that not inviting them because of a financial dispute was extreme, and they hoped my husband could convince me to reconcile. My parents claimed they intended to repay the money slowly, citing my brother's work struggles and their retirement plans. They painted me as unreasonable and selfish. Instead of engaging with their accusations, my husband remained calm and listened attentively. He suggested they send me a heartfelt message directly, rather than through him. Up until now, they had been accusing me, but my husband managed to convince them that acknowledging their mistakes might help. To our surprise, they agreed to send me a message. My husband cleverly manipulated them into admitting their actions, thinking it would soften my stance. In reality, it was an admission of guilt, and now we have the proof we need for legal action. I'm incredibly proud of how my husband handled the situation. He's like a genius, but my genius, and I love him for it. Now, thanks to his plan, my parents and brother foolishly sent an email confessing their lies and detailing their wrongdoings. With this evidence, our lawyer is moving forward with a petition to reclaim the $115,000. That money represents years of hard work and sacrifice, and I won't let my brother's laziness and my parents' enabling ruin that. We're determined to pursue legal action and get our money back. In the meantime, we've started planning our honeymoon, a short trip back to the beach where our journey began. Afterward, we might take a longer vacation, but for now, we're focusing on what makes us happy. I don't want to be like my brother, who posted boastful photos from his honeymoon, while his actions now have consequences. It's unfortunate for them, but they brought it on themselves, and they'll have to face the consequences. We're ready to do whatever it takes to ensure justice is served. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video. Stay stunned.